respected all who are listening and who are present, just to introduce briefly about myself, a brief introduction. I am Dr. Ali Talha, and I'm working as an assistant professor of molecular biology in the Lady Reading Hospital, a medical teaching institution. LRH is one of the largest tertiary care hospital in the country, and that is committed to, clinical services and training of the doctors and the TMOs and etc. So, Bill, so let me formally start by thanking the UNESCO for organizing this wonderful and timely opportunity. This is very important. And thank you to colleagues, I and Lynn and others who have made it possible, who have made this arrangement possible. Building upon what Prof. Zapta has mentioned during his slides, that we as a biologist we face a tremendous, significantly challenging situation, and that situation can be, for example, if you see the timeline of history closely in the 19th century, the in the beginning of the 19th century, the physics was, the physical sciences were passing through the same dilemma. The advancement there in the early 19th century led to the, for example, nuclear bombs, led to the all those nuclear kind of weapons. And now we as a biologist, and we and every scientist now, we know that this is the century of biology, and it's important that our actions, the actions we take today would influence the generations to come. So it's really important that we protect the rights of the generation. So just be moving it forward, we will be discussing about the Bioethics Committee and its roles and its functions. This will be the brief content of what is ethics, what is the inner essence of ethics in itself, the ethics and morality, and what are the basic principles of ethics. What do you mean by accountability in research and how it is important? What is the basic structure and functions of the Bioethics Committee, and how it plays its role in an institution, and how you can make important decisions and important considerations regarding to that. So, ethics and morality, research ethics and morality. The ethics and morality are basically used some kind of interchangeably, but they are a bit different, right? So, research ethics questions the morality of the research. And what is morality? Morality are the principles that governs the, or that tells you about the what is right and what is wrong, what characterizes a good behavior and what characterizes a bad behavior, what is good for the society and what is bad for the society. That morality tells you. What characterizes a responsible conduct of scientists? For example, we are researchers, we are scientists. So, what is the responsible conduct of science? What kind of research is good for the human beings and for the coming generations and etc. and what is not? On the other hand, what is ethics? Ethics define what are those things that are morally correct and what are those things that are not morally incorrect. In terms of, for example, research, or what are the correct behaviors, what are the incorrect behaviors, for example. So just to, ethics are the moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting activity. Moving ahead, research ethics are moral principles that guide researchers. Now we are researchers. How ethics guide us? Ethics guide us in terms of to conduct research that do not include any deception, for example, that cooking of data cooking, fabrication, falsification. Now, it was already mentioned in the earlier lectures and earlier presentations. So ethics tells us the moral principles guide us, and how can we prevent and how it should be prevented when in the context of research. And it guides you on the principles that how the how the research subjects are protected. For example, the that term that we usually use, the commodification of the research subjects. So it tells you, ethics guide you on that factor, and how scientific research is performed at research institutes. What are the norms? What should be the norms? That's what ethics tells you. How it should be conducted and how research should be disseminated, right? It's also an important factor. There are many things related to it, like authorship attributions, for example, who has genuinely contributed to a paper, and who and how is that disseminated. It's important. We will be talking on that later in the coming days. And how do you practice the ethical guidelines? How to enforce that? Bioethics Committee, what does it actually do? It promotes and facilitates ethical health services delivery, health research, and health education. Bioethical issues are beyond the national boundaries. For we are the human beings. We share a common heritage, right? So these issues, we have to mutually discuss that in the Bioethical Committee. So the point is that all human beings, face the same dilemma. We have to protect our future generations from any kind of, malpractices if they are done today. So that will affect their life. Bioethics committee usually involved in inclusive and pluralistic approach, and it involves, people from diverse backgrounds, right? People from different races or different, like for example, it has the equal participation of the society, and it focuses on the common heritage of science and technology for achieving common goals of human welfare and well-being. Like I already said, we share, all human beings, whether it is in Europe, whether it is in Asia, in Africa, we share a common heritage. And the most common point, what you can say, is our genome. We share a common kind of DNA. So, that's why we need to, sit together, and discuss all these issues. Being What's the importance of bioethics committee? So it guides you to be in line with your professional responsibilities, to avoid reputational damage individually and collectively as institute. For example, there are many research institutes, academic organizations. So if there is, of course, some malpractices, some ethically unsound practices, so it will definitely damage the repute of that concerned organization. And to ensure that the guidelines, to ensure that the biomedical research is conducted ethically, and we protect the rights of the participants, we protect the researchers who are conducting the research, and the communities and environment in general. And and bioethics committee also will, there will be many instances where the committee, face a dilemma, that there is some risk and there is some benefit of research, like we've already discussed the dual use research concerns, the dual use of research and technology. So in that case, we need to weigh the risk and we need to weigh the benefits and then decide on that, and evaluate the different processes and materials such as informed consent and etc. They promote the aims of the research and expand the knowledge. This support the values of collaborative work with mutual respect and fairness. We will be discussing that when we discuss the on the last day of the training, when we discuss the publication ethics and good practices. And they ensure that the public can trust the research. They protect the important social and moral values of humanity. So scientists are accountable. Like earlier, it was said by Prof. Datta that it is the principal investigator that is the responsible. And it is, in fact, scientists are accountable for what they do, for what they are performing, because they are using the taxpayer money. The money does not come, from a certain factory or something. It is actually the tax of the common people that they use for funding a specific kind of project. So it's important that scientists, remain accountable for what they do. And ethical standards and regulation ensure that the money is spent on research which does not involve harm. So, what is the point of the if you spend money, spend billions of funding, and that eventually leads to some harm for the society? and appropriate and rightful spending of the public money. They are important for setting up the guidelines in research, so that the research bioethics committee are important so that the research is conducted in morally acceptable manner, and they usually contain the principles and standards that help researchers to uphold value of standards of knowledge creation. Different forms of bioethics committee. Now, it can be the bioethics committee can have different, roles, and can have some different functions. For example, if you see it, bioethical committee at the healthcare context, so usually the hospital have these committees. They are more concerned with the patient care and the staff care that is there. They are more concerned about the biosafety things if we specifically address the lab. And then in the national context, they are important for policy making and advising. And research context, they are important for the protecting the research subjects. Whether the research subjects, whether the animals, for example, whether they are the human beings, if they are used like a subject or used like an object, for example, then that is ethically wrong. So bioethics committee, to conclude on this slide, the bioethics committee can have different roles, can have different mandates, but every committee is important in its every aspect. In the policy making context, like I said, it serves as advising the relevant officials on the bioethical issues, devise new government policies, consider the contemporary issues that are coming up, the emerging issues that usually, because the science is evolving at a rapid pace. You have the artificial intelligence, you have the synthetic biology. So it devises the policies, how to address and cater this issue if something emerge. Like, for example, the cloning in the future. For example, if there is the case of the human cloning, which is now ethically, considered as wrong. But what about the future? How the future would, cater it? What should be the policy about that? And it includes discussion on conducting clinical investigation, the clinical trials in human beings that are in which the human beings are participants of the research. In the healthcare context, bioethics committees are active in healthcare and hospital sectors, include patient-centered care, respected patient dignity, and allow patients autonomous choices to participate in his or her treatment and care decision. Like, for example, include the informed consent and these kind of issues. We will discuss that in coming slides. Accepting or rejecting medical procedure in advance. So these are the rules of the bioethical committee that serve in the hospital, that are in the hospital. In the research context, so deliberation on bioethical issues surrounding the human research, the extent of freedom of researchers for clinical investigation, like how long we can go about research on human beings, whether the research should, we should it caters if the research does not harm the dignity, identity, and integrity of the research participants, and reviewing, implementing, monitoring the procedures and protocols. So, building on universal norms in bioethical committee, like I previously said, we have this universal norm of what is right and what is wrong, right? So, Universal Declaration of the Human Genome and Human Rights is a reference, usually considered as a reference point for the ethics. When it includes the human dignity, respecting the human beings, respecting the human genome as a point of unification of all human beings that's shared. Like we can be irrespective what we call it as a color-blind commitment, right? Irrespective of the race, irrespective of the color, irrespective of the, for example, culture. We need to respect because we all human beings have this common heritage of human genome, and we should respect that. We should respect the uniqueness and diversity in the our across our culture. Human rights should be respected, of course. Evaluate risk versus harm. So what bioethics committee do that evaluate, for example, if there is a certain procedure, if there is a certain research proposal, for example, and that has some dual use potential. So what bioethics committee do is to evaluate the risk and evaluate the harm in the longer perspective, in the long term, and what and the procedure, the risk and harms of the procedure. And for example, if there is some clinical trial going on the humans. So it needs to evaluate what will be the outcome, what can be the drawbacks, for example, and whether the drawbacks outweighs the benefits or vice versa. Informed consent is another important aspect of the ethics of the research. Informed consent is important. Respecting without genetic discrimination means respect everyone, respect the human rights without any genetic discrimination. Objectives about the Bioethics Committee, framing codes for responsible conduct of research. What Bioethics Committee do, it's established some guidelines that you need to follow for conducting research, for ensuring the academic integrity and ensuring the workplace ethics. It defines what is acceptable and what is questionable behavior, what research should be done, what research should not be done. Review the code standards periodically according to the national regulations and international treaties, promote ethical behaviors and guide and train the researchers on responsible behaviors. Training is an important aspect of that. Fostering an ethical benchmark and safeguarding the public interest. So these are all the objectives. And further evaluate the research proposal for ethical aspects, identify the benefits and harms, evaluate the methods, protocols of materials using research, and evaluation of the risk and dual use potential. For example, if there is a research study that poses some dual use risks, so the bioethical committee should guide the membership guide about what can be the risk and how do you mitigate that, and it should categorize. Thorough review the procedures and standard operating procedures within the institute. Then there are, they can also formulate subcommittees, ethical review boards that works under the major ethical committee for different purposes. We will be coming on it. They play an advisory role for the science and technology and recommend and have the recommendations on various issues. An inclusive discussion forum, very important. It is an inclusive discussion forum for different ethical issues and gives this oversight. Who can be appointed in the bioethical committee? Very important. So there are some kind of rules, but it's not sort of strict rules that you should follow it. But really, it may differ slightly differ there with one or other culture or one or other ethical committees. But generally, what should it include the membership is that the committee should reflect diversity, multi-sectoral membership. It should involve people from diverse background. Gender balancing, you have to ensure that it should not be too male dominated, for example, or vice versa even. It should not be too female dominated. So we have to have this balance. Equality, indiscrimination, and inclusiveness embodies in the bioethical committee. Should have the expertise in science, technology, and engineering and medicine. All the members, social and behavioral scientists, ethicists, legal experts should be part of the committee. And even now, non-technical members, such as we call it as laymen, are also given the presentation in the bioethical committee, which is important because they give you a common man view of the research that is to be conducted. The lay member who is not a technical expert can add to the broadening of the ethical perspective revolving around an ethical issue. Key consideration for ensuring the independent decisions, for example, by the ethical committee, the member should not be from those institutes that actually funds the bioethical committee directly or indirectly, because then it creates something, a conflict of interest, financial interest or competing interest. So it needs to be avoided, and therefore it is recommended that those organizations that may sponsor or tend to sponsor the bioethics committee, you do not include members from them. Ethical committee needs to be large enough, recommended 8 to 10, but it's not a hard and fast rule. It can change depending upon the activity of the bioethical committee or depending upon the extent of how it is engaged. It is recommended to have more members. And then you have, try to, because we have already said that it is multi-sectoral, So we need to ensure the participation of the different segments from the society. Encouraged to have the presence of social scientists, because it's also important, because if you see, the more of the research that we are as a biologist we are doing, or the medical scientists we are doing, that really the end is really on the the social, the people, the common people, right? So the social scientist can give you a better idea of what can be the repercussions of the research that you are conducting. What can be the proposed quorum? It is suggested, but it is not, again, not a hard and fast rule. But there are some common, some basic, basic bioethical committee should composed or should comprise of a chairperson, who will be chairing the meeting and who presides over the meeting, and a secretary who is responsible for calling the meeting and manage the projects, minutes of the meeting, with the assistance of the support staff. You should have to have some ethic expert who thoroughly who know the basic principles of ethics, the beneficence, autonomy, consents, etc. So you need to have some knowledgeable person in that regard, that knows the basic principles of ethics. And you should have, of course, a technical experts who give you technical insights about the project and how it can be, how it may harm the people in future, or at present, for example, or not. And then, of course, you need to have social scientists for adequately examining the impact of research on the people, on the vulnerable community, for example. We also see, it is also suggested, to have some environmental scientists with some environmental background. This is most valid when when you do some biological research, and that may raise some kind of a biosafety or biosecurity issues. So it's important that the environmental scientist is there, who discuss the environmental aspects of the research, whether it can harm the environment or not. Layperson, I already talked about that. It's a common people view. And for a legal advice, or for the legality, legal issues, you can also appoint some civil judge or some lawyer to give, because we as a scientist or as a technical people do not know the nitty gritties of the law, or the so that's why it's suggested to have them there. We can have members from the science ministry, because they look overall, and they are basically usually the main people. The science ministry and the education department that usually funds the project. So it's important to have them, and it's important to have them in our bioethical committee. And others also, members can be appointed, for example, independent consultants with relevant expertise. There can be projects that do not fall in the domain of the any of the members. So in that, when that is the case, another consultant can be appointed and invited for the ethical discussion. And rapporteurs may also be appointed and given for the same purpose, for documenting and etc. What is the chair responsibilities? The responsibility is to critically review the agenda and working papers. Usually what we observe, that the agenda or the proposals, are circulated 1 day or 2 day before, and sometimes even just tabled on the meeting, during the meeting. So this practice needs to be avoided, and it's the responsibility of the chair to ensure that the agenda items and the proposals, for example, are circulated well before the meeting time. At least 2 to 3 weeks are at minimum, so that every member could have can have some sufficient time to read that. And it need to be followed by the secretary. Incentivize the membership in different ways, so that membership is considered as a prestige and honor rather than a liability. So what happens is that you choose only those people who consider it as important, who consider ethics as important, and also there should be some mechanism in place that the ethics or the committee membership should be considered as an honor for a scientist, and it should not become a liability that he takes for granted. Then subcommittees can be delegated. Subcommittees can be formed and can be delegated with such powers. There can be cases, for example, when the due to time restraints or something, the committee, the major committee cannot, decide on an issue for whatever reason. So in that, when that is the case, subcommittees are important, and subcommittees should have the, should work on that for further deliberation on a particular proposal or a particular aspect of the research. But however, the subcommittee's recommendation, whatever the subcommittees do, it should be tabled in the ethical committee meeting, and decisions should be in the light of their recommendation. What can be the other roles of the subcommittees? They spread awareness on the ethical issues, public engagement, establish active networks regionally and globally, because the major committee, the main committee usually accompanied have mostly senior people, so they do not have time. So such tasks can be given to the subcommittees so that they raise the awareness regarding the ethics through public engagement and other. Self-evaluation and self-accountability is important. Self-education, self-evaluation, and awareness are key factors for the committee. That is formed, that bioethics committee. What can be the self-evaluation tool? How do you evaluate yourself? The committee, it should be, maybe some tools, maybe some independent and free discussions, some questionnaire-based survey, solving case scenarios for building critical and logical thinking, and conduct SWOT analysis periodically. So these are all important factors or all important tools that the committee function can be monitored, and the committee should the competence of the committee can be evaluated. An external evaluation may also be carried out. There are some standard operating procedures, for example, but it is not, because we are trying to cover the operational part in this in my talk. So these are the SOPs, but it is not, there is no hard and fast rule. It can be changed depending upon the type, or depending upon the type of the committee, or depending upon the workload. For example, a meeting can be convened every 4 months or on special request, can be presided by the president of the institute, or whoever is the nominated president of that. Secretary will keep the attendance and minutes of the meeting. The decision should be determined by 2/3 majority. A conflict of interest needs to be declared. Very important. If the researcher is also a member of the committee, he or she should be asked to leave the meeting. That's another important point. Those who are, for example, if I am submitting a project to a bioethical committee for review, so how, and I am also the member of the review, so how is it possible for me to sit in that committee? So these issues needs to be sorted out prior to the meeting. Confidentiality of the decision and information should be maintained. Decision should be explanatory with accept, reject, modification required, or held. For example, it should not be, further a detailed kind of answer to some proposal. It should be very concise and brief, either accepted, rejected, or revisions required, for example. The PI should be informed immediately on email and in writing, so that he can, if he has some reservations, he can write back to you. The review comments should be shared with the PI. A transparent review of the decision procedure should be in place to address the concerns on the decisions, if any. Mechanism needs to be adopted for the effective implementation of the SOPs and the compliance of the SOPs. But what are the characters now which governs the decision making when it comes to ethics? So these are the ethical, what the ethical analysis is about, what factors should be included when you give a decision, when the bioethical committee is supposed to give a decision. So these are the beneficence and non-maleficence, justice, human dignity and human rights, anonymity, the rights of the future generation, unbiasedness and independence, and accountability. What is beneficence? Because beneficence is a ethical principle that relies on the, or that constitutes to do good to others. that relies on the positive aspect, good for human beings, but also animals and environment. So it's not, it really beneficence is a kind of a holistic kind of thing, a holistic kind of a word that covers every aspect of the positive outcomes or positivity, including environment, animals, and also human beings. And non-maleficence is another principle, and it basically is the intention of not doing harm to any other, including human, animals, and environment. Justice, fairness, equality, indiscrimination, and impartiality. The principle of justice actually embodies these characters: fairness, equality, indiscrimination, and impartiality. Stigmatization of any group, culture, race needs to be avoided. For example, there can be instances in which the research carried out that is particularly relevant when we talk about the health sciences, health or clinical research, in those cases, for example, where the stigma can be generated or created against a specific group or specific culture. So we need to, carefully monitor that and avoid such stigmatization. Human dignity, like I already said, we share the same. We need to respect the human rights. We should not treat human, any animal, or anything as a subject, right? We should not commodify. We should avoid the commodification, and we should have compensation, some compensation mechanism in place. A research proposal that comes to the bioethics committee. The committee should, consider what if for something goes wrong. For example, if there is a clinical trial and something goes wrong to the patient, who will compensate and what will be the compensation mechanism? Then anonymity is important. It includes the privacy and confidentiality, and the rights of the future generations. Like I already said, the science carried out today will have repercussions in the coming years, maybe 20, 30, 40 years. So we need to be full aware of that. We need to be, take the all possible protection mechanism or protection measure that will protect our future generations, including the environment, including the overall biosphere. Unbiasedness and independence. The committee, on and off the committee, should face some, institutional pressures or political pressures, some undue factors that influence their decisions. May face some personal grudges. For example, the committee members and the both who submit the project and those who are in the committee. So we need to really give them give them the importance, and we should look into that. And the peer review that you do, the review process should be unbiased. Accountability, as I already said, scientists should be accountable for their actions. And there is also, it's not only specific to the scientists, but also to the bioethical committee. They are also accountable for their decisions. They are accountable in terms of if they leak, for example, the privacy or if they of their decisions or their measures affect the patient's confidentiality, for example. To cut it short, scientists are accountable as well as ethical committee, both of them. Some norms of research, research designs and methods need to, as a bioethical committee or the committee members should evaluate the theory, the methods, and the possible outcomes of the study. What is the outcome? The competency of the researcher, whether the researcher is equipped enough or sound enough to carry out the particular project, the particular procedure or other. Know the consequences. What are the risks that the procedure or the research proposal bears? How to weigh the risk versus benefits, if the risks are more and if the benefits are more. What if there is the existence of some risk, what is the mitigation strategy for that? Informed consents. Are the study subject properly informed about the possible negative outcomes of the study? There is a difference between the consent and the informed consent. So we will be talking about it in later in coming days. That and what is the compensation if if somebody if there is some negative outcome of the study. There are some review elements how an ethical committee should review the proposals that are submitted, should consider the scientific rigor, should consider whether the study or the techniques that are used are can be reproduced, can, and when reproduced, can they have similar kind of result? What is the originality of the research? What is the evidence, etc. These are all the elements of the review that the review committee or the ethical review committee needs to follow. So, we at the end, I would say that how do we, balance it? It's important that ethical committee should find a balance in whatever it does. For example, they should focus on what we should do, like what should be done. You can done everything. You research have, for example, it has no boundaries, so you can do everything. But the problem is what should be done, and weighing the pros versus cons of the research, acknowledge the tremendous responsibilities that are bestowed on the ethical committee, and differentiate between innocent mistake and deliberate intention. Poor practices, training, for example, they can, if there is some issue which is, a mistake, for example, an innocent mistake, when that is the case, the ethical committee or the members of the subcommittee should identify those practices or those mistakes, and train them on counsel whoever is submitting the research. And such distinction is not straightforward, how to differentiate an innocent mistake and deliberate intention, but that is a dilemma that the ethical committee needs to address. This is one of the slide. It's not that hard to understand, though, but it represents the complete procedure of what can be done. It involves, when you from the submission of the proposal to the review and to the decision. So it involves the pre-assessment in which check out for the eligibility, double check it, review the technical, see the formatting, and if it is according to the scope, then you have this committee meeting and decide on that, prepare a recommendation, review the decision, and you give enough chance to the submitter of the project, or submit whoever has submitted the project, to actually respond to the review comments. So on basis of that, at the end, the decision is made, like revision required, or if there is some disapprove or approve. So additional reading material, I'll close by this, that there are some of the additional material for you that you can further study the nature and the rules of the bioethical committee and operational procedures. And thank you very much for, at least I am done for today. Thank you, and over to Fitri.